Be sure to subscribe for your chance to win a custom leather playmat when we hit 2,500 subscribers. Welcome to Fast Effect Double Speed Magic the Gathering from ELD's Time Vault Games in Bellingham, Mass., where you can join us live every Wednesday and Friday. We have a Grim Monolith from Fred all the way from Germany, getting Force of Negation from Tristan, who's on SnOko, pitching the namesake there on the first turn to prevent that explosive start. Ancient Tomb into Grim Monolith could have been 7 or more mana on the second turn, which can be very, very bad. However, we've got an Eldrazi Temple and a Thought-Knot Seer. Kind of an ideal start so far. We've got a Swords to Plowshares, Astrolabe, Abrupt Decay, and Brainstorm. I got to imagine the Swords to Plowshares are going to be the most likely choice here, as the Thought-Knot Seer won't be sticking around long otherwise. Abrupt Decay, probably not going to be amazing versus a lot of the threats in this deck. It looks like a post build, so perhaps we won't see as many of those smaller Eldrazi, things like Matter Reshaper and the Mimic, Eldrazi Mimic, I think it is. 2 mana, allowing for Brainstorm and an Astrolabe. In a different order than I would have expected. Tristan hoping to hit a fetch land in all likelihood there. Off of the Brainstorm to get a fresh card off of the Astrolabe. I don't know if that thinking makes sense, though. And now we've got a Karn, the Great Creator. And this guy just, good enough to be restricted in Vintage. Now, granted, the mana bases in Vintage are much more artifact heavy than they are in Legacy. But if you are playing a deck with artifacts, something like Storm, man, does he feel absolutely devastating. And, it does stop this Arkham Astrolabe from being able to filter mana. Another Astrolabe comes down, does half of its job in drawing a card. But Tristan going to need to rely on the power of the dual lands to actually cast his spells. This Karn, a very, very serious threat. We got a Thought-Knot Seer, Ice Fang Kodal, and this time likely to see, I guess, the Force of Will. I don't know. The board's so out of hand. Maybe the Ponder is what you take here. You kind of don't want him to draw into anything relevant. Force of Will. I can see an argument for really either of those. The Force of Will is going to potentially stop a game-winning play, whereas the Ponder is going to give Tristan the chance to get back into it, but his days are numbered here. These Thought-Knot Seers going to be held back perhaps by the Ice Fang. Fred just not looking to give Tristan any type of chance whatsoever. Those extra cards getting back to Tristan's hand with Thought-Knot Seers dying isn't going to be welcome. And Oko, not a good answer at all for Thought-Knot Seers. Euro, that guy's a legit answer, though. We're going to have a card drawn, 3 life gain, and no land put into play, but he can come back next turn and be a legitimate attacker. With a little bit of inevitability as well, he can come back from the graveyard later on when Tristan gets more cards. Euro, pretty easy to get out of the graveyard the first time. The second time often requires an actual effort. You just incidentally get 5 cards into the graveyard most games. Just playing some cantrips, sacking some fetch lands, countering a spell here and there. Getting to 5 is no problem. Getting to 10 often requires a little bit more effort. And oh, Relic of Progenitus? Karn just not your friend. Getting access to those sideboard cards game 1 almost feels unfair in a way when you get blown out by a card like Relic of Progenitus there. And Mystic Forge is going to set up potentially an insane turn here for Fred. He's going to be able to churn through his deck until he hits a land. Or a second land, I guess. Gotta look up Mystic Forge. Haven't thought about that card too often as of late. Seeing as how the place where it was mostly played was Vintage. I mean, it really hasn't been played that much in Legacy relative to its power level. I mean, it is insanely good. Same with Bolas's Citadel. And at some point, I got to imagine a Mycosynth Lattice sticking, and that would do it. That would wrap things up. A Sorceress Spyglass sees just a Swords to Plowshares. Yeah, you're only casting cards with the Mystic Forge. So a land does in fact stop it, but it can exile the top card of your library to get past that first land. Well, I'm trying to understand what happened to that Mystic Forge. Perhaps it got animated and then exiled? I was looking away at the text from Mystic Forge. This feels very out of hand from the SnOko side of the table. This is not at all what you want the board state to look like when you're playing a Force of Will deck, trying to control the situation. We got Icefang Coatl potentially getting rid of this Karn. Karn plussing. And everything turning sideways. Taking down a Thought-Knot Seer. Getting that card draw. And perhaps more importantly here, the forced block leaving Karn no longer able to be cleared. We've got a Golos which gets Force of Willed. That would have been a very, very scary card with the Cascading Cataract already in play. For those unfamiliar with Golos's second ability, it's Wooburg +2, and you spin the wheel. You just get 3 cards for free off the top of your deck. And the Wooburg is pretty difficult, so I think most people, when they look at Golos, don't necessarily think about that part of the card. It's mostly just the ramp and the body. But that wheel spinning can absolutely be a thing, especially in a permanent heavy deck like Colorless Post. Icefang Coatl pushing Karn back down to 1 loyalty counter. Euro gonna attempt to be a blocker. Urborg does give the ability for Ancient Tomb to tap for black mana, greatly saving on life over the course of a game. That's why you'll often see its inclusion in a colorless deck that doesn't need black, but pretty much just is going to allow your Ancient Tombs to be a little less painful over time and also give you some occasional utility out of your less, non-mana producing lands if you do run something like a Tabernacle. And Karn swaps into a different Karn, grabbing an Ensnaring Bridge, and whoa, we're going to be here for a while now. So Tristan likely going to be scooping somewhat soon if I had to guess. Actually, does he still have an Abrupt Decay is the question. If he still has the Abrupt Decay, this Ensnaring Bridge not going to be that big a deal. Another Sorcerous Spyglass. Let's see what we got. Well, I can't quite make those out from the glare. I believe we've got Oko stopped with one of these Sorcerous Spyglasses. And now Jace the Mind Sculptor is coming down. We'll see what he can do to help Tristan out. He needs a lot of help, as this Ensnaring Bridge is going to prevent any type of attacks. And then ultimately, Karn's going to be able to grab Mycosynth Lattice at some point, assuming Fred's actually playing the card in his sideboard. A 2-mana Ponder, thanks to the Sphere of Resistance on board. That card in particular feels especially bad at 2 mana. Brainstorm with a fetch land at 2 mana. It's pretty bad. It's not ideal, but it can at least feel like it's worth doing. Those Ponders, feels pretty grim. We've got a Manifold Key. And this is just so much mana. For an Ugin. You want a Planeswalker? I'll show you a Planeswalker. Jace the Mind Sculptor not looking to tangle with the Spirit Dragon, and we are on to game number 2. Jace can potentially hang with a Karn. Probably not going to go his way, but he can at least put up a showing. Ugin is just so over the top there that Tristan, no real choice but to scoop it up about halfway through the round. And playing a slower deck, he's definitely going to want to give himself enough time to try and get a win in game number 3 if he can get past game number 2. It's a pretty difficult situation to find yourself in tournament play when you're down a game. And, for example, if your opponent is fine with the draw, and you need the win. I mean, these are the type of considerations, the clock management, that can really matter in terms of figuring out when to scoop. I mean, sometimes it's just correct to scoop way earlier in a game when you still might have, 5% chance to win, maybe even a 10% chance to win. And it's just not worth grinding it out and almost certainly losing. I mean, it's much more likely that you'll lose. But passing on that slight chance at a win just because it's statistically more likely for you to win the next 2 games than it is to win that game and, potentially find yourself in a situation where you have no hope for a match win and still have to play another 25 minutes. I mean, stranger things can happen. Legacy decks can sometimes just overrun their opponents. But, man, it's tough when you're playing 2-mana 1/1s. We've got a Cloud Post here, which is actually a pretty scary card, I think, for a control deck to face down when you don't have access to Wasteland, Back to Basics, or Blood Moon. If you're not able to interact with your opponent's mana base, just like this can get out of hand real fast. We've got a Chalice. And that is getting responded to with a Brainstorm, digging for a force, either Force of Negation or Force of Will. Perhaps Force of Vigor for later. You wouldn't use that right away. Probably wait until you really have to play a 1 casting cost card. Hopefully you'll get more value out of a card like Force of Vigor if Tristan is in fact running it. It's also hard castable in SnOko. And a Mind Maze Tome. Giving out a bunch of those as part of our Door Prize series. It's a really interesting card, and now this Eldrazi Temple allowing for a Thought-Knot Seer. I'm not sure what we're seeing here. I didn't see a card taken, so I think this is actually in response to the Thought-Knot. And we've got an Abrupt Decay to take out the Chalice, and a Path to Exile to get rid of the Thought-Knot Seer. Oh, back to basics. That's a dangerous card. This could be super bad for Fred. Now this Thought-Knot is almost certainly going to take the back to basics here. So we got Force, Jace the Mind Sculptor left in hand. And if Tristan can find another back to basics, this could be very, very difficult for Fred to contend with. I don't think he's got... Yeah, he doesn't have any basics. There was a Path to Exile that resolved, and we did not see a waste enter the battlefield, so legit 0 basics in Fred's deck. This feels a little bit like Russian roulette. Every draw step could lead to Tristan just completely locking out Fred's mana base. He's going to need to get a board presence. You do not want to be playing draw go when your opponent has just cards that can just straight up win. And it's going to be somewhat difficult to actually build a board presence against this Jace. We got Sphere of Resistance and a Relic of Progenitus. Another Abrupt Decay. It takes out Sphere of Resistance and allows for an Arkham's Astrolabe to come down. Drawing a card, continuing to smooth out Tristan's mana, give him really options to cast any spells in his deck at this point. Sphere of Resistance off the top, or perhaps he had another one in his hand, but this one is going to get a Force of Negation. Just too much of a pain to play under for Tristan. All of those efficient spells become so much less efficient, and now we've got an Ugin. This one gets Force of Will and a Sorceress Spyglass sees Sylvan Library and is going to go ahead and shut down this Jace. So Sylvan going to give some type of chance to get back into this. Relic going to work, chipping away at the graveyard. May not even need to be sacrificed in order to eliminate Euro as a even contender for coming back from the graveyard. We've got Ugin. And Manifold Key. Oh, and this is getting a little uncomfortable here. So we have Euro coming into the battlefield and getting bounced by Karakas, so kind of a draw engine. It's at least going to eliminate this Relic of Progenitus from shutting the whole thing down. And my Mind Maze Tome, when there are 4 or more counters on it, you exile it and you gain 4 life. So Fred able to get 4 extra cards out of it, opting to cash in the extra card rather than just start scrying with it. And this is looking pretty grim. We've got a Chalice of the Void, and actually coming down at 3, I believe, to stop the Euro. It's the only thing Tristan had going on. However, now a Brainstorm. And here he's actually going to scoop it up, as it is just too much of an advantage there. Fred, Planeswalkers, Artifacts, Disruption. We got Chalices, Spheres. This is quite a difficult deck to play against. And just really happy to have Fred playing all the way from Germany, which is just really awesome. If you guys are interested in playing with us on Wednesdays or Fridays, you can find out how in the description. Thanks for watching. That is all for this one, but don't worry, there is a lot more. You can check out our older videos, and we're always putting out new videos from ELD's Time Vault Games in Bellingham, Massachusetts. If you want to help the channel, of course, you can like, subscribe, share, tap that notification bell so you can know the next time our new videos come out. Thanks for watching.